Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet. Sadly, still wrapped in a pandemic. In many parts of the United States and some other countries, it feels sort of normalized. In many other parts, it's not, and surges are still underway. Less than half the planet is vaccinated fully, far less. Just a few months ago, I was saying, 10% of the planet was fully vaccinated. So we're making progress on that front, but it's an overheating planet as well. And we live in a part of the solar system that's through recent history is back at 3 or 4 billion years ago. Earth was formed by all these objects that were pummeling around through early evolution. That's kind of settled down to a certain extent. But as anyone who's visited some of the pockmarks on this planet or looks at the moon, you know that we still face another kind of risk. And I'm really thrilled to have two friends from B612 Foundation here this morning to give a quick briefing on some things related to what's going on in the next few weeks. There's a launch window, not a launch date. The launch window opens November 24th for the DART mission, which is actually really low budget as these things go. A test of a way to deflect an asteroid. It's very different than the Armageddon view. And also the movie Don't Look Up, which it takes a very different look at what I call the blah, 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 bang habit we have as human beings when it comes to risks that we all know are there, but that are too big to understand in some way or other. And we discount because they don't fit the way our brains work. And that movie we'll talk about too. Hoping to get Adam McKay on the show sometime soon. So we have Ed Liu, who's an astronaut who has moved into sort of the planetary defense part of the understanding space. He is the one of the founders of B612 Foundation with Rusty Schweikert, Apollo 9 astronaut, who's a friend of mine. And Danica Remy, who is the president of B612, is here too. Great to have you both here. Hope you're
it's great to be here.
Safe and sane. Safe and sane is what we all need.
Safe, yes. Sane, maybe.
Yeah, sane is maybe. I want to play. This is like a 45-second.
For a lot, Andy.
Yeah, I know. Sane-ish, safe-ish, and sane-ish. So let me just show this little clip. It's very quick. Adam McKay was very kind to help NASA take a look at this mission that's coming up, and it has a little context of his movie too.
I heard there's an asteroid. Tell me about it.
Hi, I'm Adam McKay, director of Don't Look Up. Our movie is about three scientists who tried desperately to warn the planet of an impending doomsday comet and are ignored. Our movie's made up. It's a comedy. But in fact, the brilliant scientists at NASA are actually launching a mission. It's called DART, the Double Asteroid Redirection Test. And what they're going to test is, can you send up a mission that can deflect an asteroid and steer it away from Earth if, God forbid, something like that were ever to happen? Remember to keep an eye out for it. It's going to be spectacular.
And it will. I guarantee it. I'm hoping to see it as soon as I can. But I want to pop forward here one more time here to Ed's.
I heard there's an asteroid.
Let's go. Hold on here. Yeah, so Ed, you're one of several hundred people who've had the incredible privilege of seeing this planet from orbit. And you could have gone into all kinds of work after that, in the industries related to aerospace and the like. But you started doing things. I first got to know you more than a decade ago, and you were just before you were giving it, maybe it was this testimony to a Senate committee on the importance of having a better telescope to see these things before it's too late. Planetary defense or deflection of an asteroid doesn't matter.
Telescopes combined.
If you don't see it.
So it'll be far way more effective.
But I remember you told me something at that time, which was either you or Rusty, was that one of the committee members, Senate staff or something later was saying, we totally buy into this, but I can't have my boss make it a priority because he'd be unelected as some kind of space ball. And but it seems that things have changed. So maybe give a quick sketch of where we are from where you have been, and have things changed?
Yeah, the seriousness with which people take this has changed a lot over I would say, the last decade and a half. A number of big events have happened. First off, the sort of an understanding of the idea that what killed off most of the species on Earth when the dinosaurs died out was indeed an asteroid impact. I mean, that's very well established now, down to and including the discovery of fossils.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry.
Fossils
Yep.
that were laid down on the day that the dinosaurs died. It's an amazing site has been found, thousands of miles inland, caused by water sweeping. And again, this is probably 10,000 miles from the impact site. Sort of third of the way or quarter of the way around the world, something like that. And there are dinosaurs washed ashore and killed, along with the glass sphericals, molten glass sphericals from the actual impact that have landed, that are landing and fossilized in the mud. Really quite interesting.
Amazing.
Then, of course, in 2013, we actually had a small asteroid, a tiny little asteroid, just about 60 feet across, narrowly miss the Russian city of Chelyabinsk. Narrowly miss meaning, I want to say 50 to 100 kilometers away. So pretty good distance from that. But even that tiny little asteroid moving at that great speed did put about 1,500 people in the hospital, destroyed hundreds of thousands of windows, knocked down some buildings. We actually came very close to having about 1 million casualties had that actually hit the city. So I think that those things are in the public consciousness, and now we find that movies and things like that, everyone just understands that these things do on occasion happen.
So is let's talk about the two aspects of this. There's more than two. And Danica, you can get into the education part too. But we'll focus on Ed here because I think he's a little time constrained. There's detection, there's deflection. The DART mission is mainly the second part of that. How much do we adequately, are we moving into the detection part adequately? I know that you've been really focused on that through B612 and the Asteroid Institute.
Well, what you're talking about, Andy, is that there's two aspects of this. Number one, which is what DART is all about. If we find an asteroid that's going to hit the Earth, can we keep it from hitting the Earth? And the answer to that is, we believe yes. There are a couple different ways of doing it. DART is going to do the simplest of them: run into an asteroid with a spacecraft, just literally ram it. And it turns out that if you do that many years ahead of time, the absolutely ridiculously tiny change in the velocity of that asteroid that you make by hitting it is enough to keep it from narrowly, from hitting the Earth. Of course, in order for you to do that, you need to know that a particular asteroid is in fact on a collision course with Earth. And there are a lot of asteroids out there, and there we're not doing as well. We have found the largest of the asteroids, meaning the ones that, should they hit the Earth, they would wipe out human civilization. Now, we haven't found all of them, found more than 90%, pretty good. And none of those that we know of is going to hit the Earth anytime in the next century. Now, the smaller ones we're doing less good on, down to the size of the ones that would only destroy a city. We've only found maybe about 1% or so of those. So for those, there's nothing we can do until you know where the asteroid is, where it's going, and the fact that it's going to hit the Earth. So, but it is getting better. We're building new telescopes. In fact, there's in particular one new telescope that is being coming online in about 2 years, called the Vera Rubin Observatory. And it's funded by the National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy. Pretty good fair fraction of $1 billion. It's going up on a mountaintop in Chile. And over the next 10 years, it will actually find and track a large number of asteroids, more asteroids than all other telescopes combined. So that's great. It won't get us to knowing where all of them are, but it's a big improvement from where we are today. So you combine the two, find and track with deflect if needed, and you can protect the Earth.
And how important is the amateur astronomy community here? Also, just getting more eyeballs in space. A couple months ago, I wrote about the there was a Jupiter strike that got a lot of. It was caught by amateur photographer astronomers and the like.
Yeah,
Is that
what
a
an
big part of this too?
incredible photo that was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But the amateurs do play a great role. They're not as big in the discovery because right now these bigger telescopes built by institutions, these billion-dollar machines, can see much further away than any amateur telescope could conceivably do. So they will see things first. But the amateurs have a role to play by following up on those observations. As those asteroids get closer to the Earth, they can take more observations and help us track something better, because the more often and over the longer period that you see an asteroid, the better I can calculate its orbit. And that's important because when I'm trying to predict ahead, that asteroid may not hit the Earth for 30, 40, 50, 100 years. I need to actually determine its orbits incredibly precisely to say, will that hit the Earth or not?
Right. And Danica and Ed, let's get to this. The next question, which is, let me see if I've got this queued up right here. Oh no, there's our friend Rusty. But I had a slide I was going to show, but maybe I screwed up. Yeah, it's been sorry. It's been a long couple of days. Let's get rid of all that stuff. Hold on.
Oh, you're like me. You have a lot of tabs open.
Yeah. What do you do? The time scale thing is so interesting to me. You know, the idea that you can get precision on a risk to a couple decades ahead potentially. You know, so we know an asteroid is coming. We know there's a point when it'll hit in the Indian Ocean and create a great tsunami. And I had the privilege of participating in that scenario exercise that Rusty held in Mexico City. Rusty and others. I can't remember if you were there.
That year I was not. No.
Yeah, over a decade ago. And this gets to the public awareness and policy side. It was pretty clear there's a big gap in our protocols internationally, nationally, for how that plays out. Like
that's changed a lot too since those days.
Good.
Since then, there has been, led by the Association of Space Explorers, which is the sort of group of astronauts from around the world. A set of agreements was come to at the United Nations in which nations agree that should there be a case of something which has a chance of hitting the Earth, how they would share observations and data, and how they would coordinate to take more data to find, to refine the orbit, as I said, how well do we know the orbit? There's also been a secondary agreement which says, should one actually have to be deflected from hitting the Earth, how would the nations of the Earth coordinate a campaign of missions to prevent it from hitting the Earth? And
right.
That's, I think, a big achievement. Number one, it shows people are taking it seriously. Governments are taking it seriously. And that those initial steps, having been around United Nations things, agreements between countries, they take forever at times.
Oh yeah,
and
believe me, having
you want to get those done ahead of time before the agreement's done ahead of time, so you can just sit down and start talking rather than discussing the color of the chairs and the length of the conference table, that sort of stuff.
Having covered the climate treaty process since before there was a climate treaty process, 1988, 1990, and even now we're still saying this isn't working.
Yeah, they're still at times discussing the color of the chairs and the length of the table, right?
That's right. There are some images here Danica had queued up, and maybe Danica, can you talk about your perspective on this too? The the public awareness and how that translates or doesn't into policy priority.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is a graph that I think helps contextualize the discovery challenge that humanity has with respect to asteroids that come near our home planet. And so the public education aspect of this is really important. And what Ed just talked about is called the International Asteroid Warning Network, which is a UN body, and the Space Mission Planning Group, which is the coordinating body if we knew one was on its way towards our home planet. But the important thing that we realized after Chelyabinsk was that public education was really important. People needed to understand the discovery challenge in front of humanity. And so we launched something, Rusty, myself, a young filmmaker by the name of Greg Richters, and the lead guitarist from Queen, Dr. Brian May, launched something called Asteroid Day, which we modeled after Earth Day. So all the climate work that the climate activists have done over the last decade actually gave us a framework to figure out how we should help the world talk about asteroids. So, essentially nobody owns Asteroid Day, and it's self-organized in countries all around the world and their languages. But we launched that with the 100X declaration, which is essentially saying we need to increase the rate of asteroid discovery by 100X. And so that's what we've been trying to educate the world about, as well as, asteroids are interesting planetary bodies, celestial bodies. We may want to utilize the resources from them. They will tell us about, hopefully, the origins of life on our home planet, and occasionally they hit us. So we always like to point out that we have a big discovery challenge in front of us. And Ed can talk a little bit about the ranges here. But, we have a lot of discovery work to do. And so, Ed, you just want to talk about how the various telescopes have covered this and will cover this discovery work?
Well, we talked a little bit about that beforehand. There are a number of telescopes around the world dedicated towards finding and tracking asteroids, and the big giant one will be starting Vera Rubin in just a couple of years on that mountaintop in Chile. But the main point I think that Danica was making is absolutely correct. We're at an interesting time here, in the sense that we are beginning to map really the solar system for the first time. The vast majority of the celestial bodies in our solar system are asteroids, actually. And by vast majority, I mean nearly everything is an asteroid. And then there's a bunch of large planets. So if you think of a map of the Earth, that's like the continents and the islands, right? The map of the solar system is, however, different than the map of the Earth, in that every single thing in it is moving at high speed, in fact. And so the locations of things, the trajectory of things are what's important to understand if you're building this map of the solar system. And this map is super important because, as Danica just said, it allows you to, for the first time, really think about how we're exploring the solar system. I can understand the evolution of the solar system because it's written in those trajectories. I can someday, as human beings, move throughout the solar system and develop things throughout the solar system. Maps are essential to where everything is and how you get from point A to point B. And finally, this map tells you if any of these islands, these small worlds, these asteroids, will hit any of the other objects, in particular the Earth. And so by mapping everything using these telescopes and computers, essentially calculating trajectories, we get all that at once. Not hearing you, Andy. I'm not hearing anything.
Let's try again.
There we go.
That's live for you.
Oh, yeah. No producer here. I think I remember you talking to me about Google Maps. Years ago, I wrote a piece when Google added the oceans to Google Maps. Mm-hmm. And it was this huge, big blank spot, and Sylvia Earle, an ocean scientist, and others would say, hey, what about that stuff that's under ground level? You mean,
it's still part of the Earth, right?
So looking up as well seems totally logical, especially as you say, if it's an area of both risk and opportunity.
Absolutely. And it's also a very interesting time because the development of space is going on increasingly rapidly. The investment in companies that are working in space has skyrocketed, and it's growing at a very, very high rate. And I think what we're seeing is that things in space that were difficult to do by governments even 10 years ago are now being done by small groups of startups. And it's very reminiscent of what we saw with the computer revolution. When it previously took a government to do certain things, when a group of 20 recent college graduates can get together and, in a garage and do those same things, everything changes, and we're watching that happen today in space.
Yeah, there's sorry again. In the trailer for the film, there's a point when the White House is meeting with the scientists, and someone talks about the $10 trillion value of the asteroid that's heading toward the Earth, and they're sort of arguing about that, and Leo DiCaprio's character is saying, "But we're all going to die," and Jonah, I think it's Jonah Hill, is saying, "Yeah, but we'll be rich," which is another reason I can't wait to see the film. But that the reality of that aspect of things seems so important. One thing I want to ask you though is this: when we think about the scope of these approaching existential risks, the next pandemic, the worst case scenarios in global warming, this super volcano, sorry, and an asteroid, there's a point at which there's still a discounting that goes on for these fat tail problems, the ones where it's high uncertainty on some aspects and huge consequence. And do you wake up more comfortable these days that we're inching toward integrating those kinds of risks better?
Actually, I'm feeling more and more hopeful, not because I believe that humans are actually getting any better at looking at long-term problems, but because the solutions to some of these long-term problems now no longer require as many resources to do. For the reason I was saying, costs are coming down for doing a lot of these things. If it no longer costs the resources of a country to do things, then you no longer need to convince a country in order to solve the problem, right? And that's exactly what the B612 Foundation is demonstrating, that small groups of people today can actually make a marked difference in these problems, whereas in 1960 that would not have been possible. These things would just have been too expensive to do. So we can make actually improvements in the tracking and determination of asteroid orbits that were the province of entire nations decades ago. And so that actually allows these problems to be solved. I think there's a lot of problems like that. Like, what if it was possible to have an effect on climate, say CO2 production, if instead of requiring trillions of dollars, it took a few million? Well, that problem could be solved tomorrow, right? And that's exactly what's happening in the case of the asteroid threat.
I think that's a really important point. That's come up in my climate reporting too. Dan Schrag, who's a planetary scientist at Harvard, long ago gave a presentation at the UN where he said, with an issue like climate change, there are these knobs that are adjustable. And political will is one, technology is one, understanding of the risk, communication. But he said technology can, if you boost the technology knob, you can lower the political will threshold. But as you were saying, if things are cheaper or more scalable, more pliable, you can get progress. And I thought that was pretty powerful. So maybe there's some lessons here for the climate challenge too.
I think there definitely is. I mean, we're already seeing it there on the climate side that there's, for instance, tremendous investment in small nuclear reactors. Okay, private investment. Is that many of those things are not being done by governments.
That's true.
In fact, most of those are private now. And think about what the difference it would make if it was possible to have a clean, inexpensive source of electrical power. Clean, steady, reliable source of electrical power. Makes all the difference.
Well, I'm doing a lot of my work is focused on that question. So hopefully it has this other, maybe I wouldn't mind hearing from both of you, your own sense of like, what are the special distinctions between asteroid risk and climate risk if you've been in that, if you've been thinking about that before. One is a very abrupt, dramatic thing that's lurking, it's inevitable. The other is more of a human-driven phenomenon that has this long time scale, both of the, you can't stop global warming in a heartbeat. It took 200 years to build that forcing on the planetary system. So there's some of these characteristics that are profoundly different, but some things are similar.
I actually think that the differences are far more, because as you say, the climate issue is really one of lifestyles, things that we as human, that many billions of people do day in, day out, every single day, right? Whereas the asteroid issue is one that's lurking. It's been going on for as long as this planet's been around, right?
Right.
Well, and actually, and climate has changed too. But the recent things that we have seen have been human induced. Okay,
Right.
Not that climate hasn't been changing since the beginning; it has. But the other thing is, it is far more of a cut and dried technical issue, in the sense that there isn't really any question about how we calculate orbits. We understand orbits very, very well. We understand Newton's laws. We understand the general relativistic corrections. We understand orbital mechanics. Okay, so those sorts of things, it's a far simpler system. Okay, the climate is a far more complicated system with a lot of approximations that we have to make, and the source of a lot of debate over exactly how you try and understand this. Very, very complicated. In the sense, asteroids are very, very simple. And again, solutions to it are, much, much, much simpler. Look at what DART is doing.
Right.
Launch a rocket, run into an asteroid. Bingo. So, if it was that easy to solve the climate issue, launch a rocket, wait a few months, hit some object, we're done. We wouldn't be having those debates, right?
Right.
We just do it. So I think there's huge differences. The one similarity is, though, that you need to think in the long term for you to say what are the threats that are up on the horizon, that could happen, that happen over the long term. And in that sense, there is a commonality, but I think there's far more differences.
Right. And Danica, in dealing with this sort of education and policy education part, what do you think of, in this context? That's when Ed or was it Rusty told me that anecdote about the Senate was it was troubling, but again, it does seem like things have changed, at least for this issue.
Yeah, I think that the question about progress around this issue is an important one, and it's really where the public education piece comes in. To Ed's point, it's a relatively simple problem to solve from a technological and from a scientific understanding perspective, compared to something as complex as climate, and what an individual and a nation state has to do in order to participate in the solution. And so that's why the public education part of the work that we do is so important, which is, here's an existential risk. There is a solution. The scientists agree. We're about to test one of them. Thank you very much, DART and NASA, for leading the world through this. European Space Agency is going to come in behind DART with their HERA mission to do follow-up measurements and add additional understanding to this very simple way of deflecting an asteroid, a kinetic impactor. So the world needs to kind of understand that and in some ways I always say this, it's the asteroid problem is a little bit of training wheels for us as humans, collectively as humans, because it is a relatively simple, compared to other existential risk, problem to solve. We, as Rusty always says, we just need to get to it. Like, we know how to do it. We've got a gravity tractor solution that we'd like to try out. We've talked about a nuclear option, which we hope we don't have to use if we're able to map the solar system in a fairly rapid time frame. So making sure that the world understands that this is absolutely completely possible, and that we collectively as human beings should celebrate that we can use our brains to solve a problem that will may not impact tomorrow, may not impact, in 30 years, but is something that will happen. I mean, it's 100% certain we will get hit. Our home planet will get hit. And so let's work together, which we can at the United Nations level, which, the ASE started. And then at the local level, like, let's start educating people about asteroids. Get them excited about looking to the sky, get them to understand that they're valuable, resources as we move out into the solar system. And importantly, to help them understand that they're part of why we're here on this planet. So there's sort of three parts to asteroids that we're, very excited about, and we want the public to understand that. So I'm hopeful about progress. And like I said, I think it's training wheels for us to work together on something that feels, really big, and it is big.
On that last point you made about the three-pronged thing about how asteroids, incoming debris stuff, is part of what's made life possible, if not even brought life here, depending on which hypothesis you pursue. It feels like you've created a really valuable context for maybe a future talk session we can do on what that would look like in a curriculum. How do you change our basic understanding of the solar system? What Ed said about, the vast majority of stuff in the solar system is not a planet. So it's this stuff. And that gives a bigger sense of integrating it, normalizing it too, maybe perhaps. And so it's not as much of seen as a goofy side note.
Yeah.
Ed, I know you probably have to get going. We're all hectic these days. There's a good note from Dan Thaler there, who's been a long time viewer of these sessions, talking about Lucifer's Hammer, a book he has read many times. And
Yep.
So maybe just briefly, what is the value of literature, fiction, movies, storytelling? Did we get it wrong with some of the earlier ones, Deep Impact and Armageddon, or was that helpful to the process? And do you have your own sense of what a film like Don't Look Up could do?
Well, things that bring things into the public consciousness are good. Real issues into the public consciousness. And entertainment is a great way of doing that. Now, obviously, you should not try and learn any physics from any Hollywood movie. Period. End of story. Right. That's
gravity taught us that.
Yeah, that's not the point. Right.
Right.
But the point is that people do sort of intuitively understand that these things are real issues, right? People talk, and I think that's really they're fun anyhow too. Okay, so one thing I do want to point out though, and this is a misconception a lot of people have. They think that asteroid deflection means I'm going to make that asteroid make a right-hand turn and miss the Earth. Okay, or I'm going to really deflect that asteroid. In reality, what you're actually doing, and this is why it's so amazing, is you're going to change, like for instance, DART is going to change the velocity of that asteroid, which is moving around the sun, by about 1/1,000,000th of 1%. Wow. You can't even perceive that tiny change. Okay. However, that change in trajectory for an asteroid, which was going to hit the Earth and hit the Earth, say in 20 or 30 years, that actually upsets the timing. In fact, the course that it goes on is almost imperceptibly different. You can't even see the difference between its trajectory, if you like, but the timing is now off because it's moving either slower or faster. The Earth, which is a moving target, will now miss that asteroid because the timing is wrong now. Okay. So you're not actually changing the direction much of an asteroid. You're changing the timing of when it arrives at the potential impact point with the Earth. Okay. So this also means that we as humans actually have to understand what the difference of 1/1,000,000th of 1% makes to whether or not an impact happens. I mean, that is how accurately we need to be able to calculate the velocity of something moving through space in order to tell you if something is going to hit the Earth or not, right? So the tremendous precision with which we can do astronomical observations and calculations and trajectory and calculations of things is at the level below the 1/millionth of 1%. Okay, so that precision is what allows you to deflect an asteroid using a change in speed of 1/millionth of 1%. Right, because I can understand, I could draw, I can say that makes a difference confidently, and that is amazing to me that human beings have reached that point. That's the precision level we're working at. I think it's totally amazing.
It's astounding. And that relates to some issues I've heard about with liability. You know, if you nudge an asteroid and it hits South Africa instead of India, how does that all work out in the long run?
But yeah, that's a long. That's a worth showing in itself, because you don't actually get to move it in any direction you want. There's some physics constrains things in a certain way. That's probably worth its own discussion.
For sure. Well, it's been great to have you both here today, and have a good weekend. Do you have any sense of odds? It sounds like there's a window opening at November 24th. That's the launch window.
it should go on that date. And I mean, that's the plan. So hopefully in a few days here, and roughly, and less than a year from now, that should actually be impacting, literally running into the asteroid Didymos B.
Well, let's have you back on when we're tracking some of these aspects of this phenomenon. I do think overall, as I wrote back in a couple of months ago, I think we might be getting this right after many years of folks like you, Ed Lu, and Rusty Schweikert and others, and Danica Remy making the case for investments in both detection, deflection, and education, because we have to make sure that we have this set in our heads as we're thinking about all these risks and opportunities humanity faces. This is Andy Revkin at the Columbia Climate School, Earth Institute, Sustain What webcast with Ed Lu and Danica Remy from B12 Foundation, B12Foundation.org.
B612.
Oh, sorry, B612. Oh my God. Come on, brain. Not enough coffee. B612, which comes from that great book, the French book, The Little Prince, right? Who lived on an asteroid. So
thank you very much, Andy, for having us on.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, for hosting this conversation.
Great.
Always fun talking.
Come back sometime. Take care.
We will.
Bye-bye.
Oh, by the way, I'm showing Shoemaker-Levy there, the impact of those fragments on Jupiter, that was.
Oh yeah, that was pretty cool.
How big a spark was that? But that feels like
that actually.
Just before we go, that
was one of the things that got Congress moving on tasking NASA with finding the largest of the asteroids, the ones which could wipe out human civilization. This was one of the impetuses for that.
There you go. Thanks again to both of you.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good day. Take care.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye-bye. So for those of you hanging on, I'm going to show one more clip, although I think it's a fairly choppy broadcast today. So let's see if this will work. It's a chat I did with Rusty Schweikert in 2013 after where are you, Rusty? He's on here. Okay, sorry. Again, he's an Apollo 9 astronaut who had had become another early voice for action on the risks we faced. And this was right after the Russian close call. Hopefully this will work. An epiphany, yes, Scott Murto. Let me know if you can hear. Let me know if you can't hear it. Okay, no audio. I have to fix something. I think we'll call it quits there. It looks like I have a very slow internet connection today too. So sorry about that false ending. Take care of yourselves. I'm going to be doing more shows about this issue, and be well.